70–80% of businesses are permitted like this.
All right. We will call to order the City of Kenai Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for April 13th, 2022. Will you stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item A2, roll call, please.
Chair Tweet,
Here.
Commissioner Askin. Here. Commissioner Fikes. Here. Commissioner Halstead.
Here.
Commissioner Woodard. Here. Vice Chair Doffett.
Here.
Commissioner Greenberg.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Before we get the agenda approval, just want to make note and read into the record the laydown, which is add to items F1 and F2, Resolution PZ 2022-08 and PZ 2022-09. Public comment from a few people. Carolyn Mack Paget, Jim Richardson, Barbara Baker, and Rusty Huff. I believe that is it. All right. So with that, a motion to approve the agenda, please. Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve the agenda with the additional comments.
All right. Second.
Second.
Any objections? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item A4, consent agenda. Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And a second.
I'll second.
All right. Any objections? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Item C, scheduled public comment. We have none. Item D, unscheduled public comment. Anyone wishing to come forward and speak to an item that is not set for a public hearing tonight? Doesn't appear so. We will move on. Item E, consideration of plats. We have none. Item F, we have two. F1 is Resolution PZ 22-08, an application for a conditional use permit for cabin rentals for the property described as Lot 3, Acre Subdivision Part 4, located at 1025 Angler Drive, Kenai. Application submitted by Thomas Hosing, 1865 Frederickson Street, Fremont, Nebraska. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll go to a motion to approve PZ 2022-08, application for conditional use permits for recreational cabin rentals for the proposed described lot.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, staff report, Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait and fellow commissioners. Staff's presentation is on Resolution PZ 2022-08, conditional use permit for cabin rentals. The presentation and staff report is also on Resolution PZ 2022-09, conditional use permit for a guide service. And as noted, these have two separate resolutions and public hearings for these items. And this is for 1025 Angler Drive. Brief summary. The applicant is Thomas Hosing. This is for 1025 Angler Drive. And we can see here a photo aerial depicting the subject property on Angler Drive. It's approximately 1.15 acres. The existing zoning is rural residential. The current land use has residential dwellings on it, and the land use plan is low density residential. Continuing the summary, cabin rentals and guide service are listed as conditional uses within the rural residential zone in Kenai Municipal Code 142210. KMC 142320 definitions defines cabin rentals means the renting out of one or more individual detached dwelling units or buildings to provide overnight sleeping accommodations for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. And guide service means any activity on any premises used for collecting or returning persons from recreational trips when remuneration is provided for the service. On September 13, 2021, and January 17, 2022, planning staff mailed a notice of KMC violation for 1025 Angler Drive for operating cabin rentals without a conditional use permit, and that without a conditional use permit would be unable to rent cabins for the 2022 summer season. And just to clarify, to rent cabins, that would be for the definition of cabin rentals, which is the period of less than 30 consecutive days. Here we have the submitted site plan from the applicant identifying the layout of the existing cabins, which there are 3 1-2-story cabin and 2 single-story cabins, and the driveway and parking for the property. Staff's analysis, KMC 1420-150E, review criteria for conditional use permits. Pursuant to KMC 1420-150A, the intent of a conditional use permit is to allow some uses that may be compatible with the designated principal uses in specific zoning districts, provided certain conditions are met. KMC 1420-150E, conditional use permits review criteria, states 6 conditions that the Planning and Zoning Commission must deem to exist when establishing findings prior to issuing a conditional use permit. We're going to go over each of those review criteria now. Criteria 1, the use is consistent with the purpose of this chapter and the purposes and intent of the zoning district. Staff's response is the proposed cabin rentals, 1-2-story, 2 1-story cabins, meets the intent of the rural residential zone to provide for low-density residential development in outlying and rural areas in a form which creates a stable and attractive residential environment. The specific intent in establishing this zone is, 1, to separate residential structures to an extent which will, A, preserve the rural open quality of the environment, and B, prevent health hazards in areas not served by public water and sewer. And 2, to prohibit uses which would, A, violate the residential character of the environment, and B, generate heavy traffic in predominantly residential areas. The existing cabins are consistent with the intent of the rural residential district by preserving the rural, open quality of the environment with a site design that preserves many trees and creates privacy between neighboring parcels and Angler Drive. While cabin rentals and guide services would generate consistent vehicle trips, it would likely not generate heavy traffic. Those persons renting cabs and guide services would generate approximately, and this is a little subjective, but approximately as many trips as a year-round residents on the property. KMC 1422 land use table permits 3 cabins on a rural residential property. The land use table provides that's it for criteria 1. Moving on to criteria 2. The economic and non-economic value of the adjoining property and neighborhood will not be significantly impaired. Staff's response is the parcel located to the north is a residential cabin, to the east is Beaver Creek, to the south is a lodge and guide service, and to the west is a commercial marijuana cultivation facility. Angler Drive consists of rural residential zone parcels and has many conditional use permits for uses such as lodges, cabin rentals, guide services, and marijuana cultivation. The subject property with cabin rentals and a guide service would fit in with the character of the neighborhood by land use, lot size, lot orientation, and natural character of the property. Both the economic and non-economic value of adjacent properties should not be significantly impacted by the use of cabin rentals and a guide service. All improvements on the subject property are existing. Criteria 3, the proposed use is in harmony with the comprehensive plan. Staff's response. The land use plan from the 2016 comprehensive plan proposes a low-density residential land use for this neighborhood. The low-density residential land use classifications is defined in the comprehensive plan. Low-density residential, because of location or poor site conditions, is intended for large lot, single-family, low-density residential development. The area will typically be developed with individual on-site water supply and wastewater disposal systems. Streets will typically be constructed to rural street standards, i.e. gravel. And sidewalks will not be typically included in the subdivision design. Rural residential becomes low-density residential to avoid confusion with the zoning category of rural residential. The subject parcel has similar land use, lot size, and orientation. And actually, I wanted to just go back just to note that on the, and what we mean by that size and that orientation is, if you can see on the right-hand side of Angler Drive, those properties are laid out and designed that way. They're all very similar. It's providing from the access on Angler Drive, each of these narrow lots, long lots, and each providing access to Beaver Creek. And that's actually very typical design for this type of subdivision, and trying to provide as many properties access to a resource such as Beaver Creek. In other locales, you'll find this where it's trying to provide access for farmers to a resource for water for farming purposes. And that's a little bit as opposed, if you can see on the left-hand side of Angler Drive, the lots don't have that orientation and that lot design. You'll find much larger, blockier parcels on that side, in that it's not providing that access to the resource of Beaver Creek. On-site water and wastewater systems in low density as neighboring properties. Angler Drive is paved and constructed to a higher standard than gravel rural streets with no sidewalks. The comprehensive plan has goals to support businesses and economic development and to provide a high quality of life within the city. Below are specific goals and objectives from the comprehensive plan that support this conditional use permit application. Goal 1 of the comprehensive plan is to promote and encourage quality of life in Kenai. Q4, promote the siting and design of land uses that are in harmony and scale with the surrounding uses. And as noted, this property has the same layout as surrounding properties and similar uses as others on Angler Drive. And goal 2 of the comprehensive plan is to provide economic development to support the fiscal health of Kenai. Economic development 9, capitalize on the tourism industry by marketing Kenai as a destination for recreational activities, conventions, festivals, arts, cultural, and other events. Criteria 4, public services and facilities are adequate to serve the proposed use. Staff's response is the subject property is accessed via Angler Drive, a paved, city-maintained road. City water and sewer is not in the vicinity of the subject property, therefore on-site water and wastewater treatment and disposal systems are necessary and located on the property. The property has access to electricity, gas, and telephone services. Criteria 5, the proposed use will not be harmful to the public safety, health, or welfare. Staff's response is the use of a rental cabin and guide services will not be harmful to public safety, health, or welfare. Staff believes that services are available to adequately serve this development. There are recommended conditions with requirements related to public safety, health, and welfare that we'll find in the recommended conditions. Condition 2, prior to starting any business operations, a landscape site plan must be reviewed and approved by the planning director. This condition ensures site plan and landscaping requirements are met, including for vehicle parking. And condition 9, quiet hours are 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. This condition will help ensure the welfare of neighbors in protecting from noise. Criteria 6, specific conditions deemed necessary. Staff's response is see conditions of approval as set forth below. I'm going to read each one of these 9 conditions. And I did want to note, while the public hearing discussion is on PZ 2022-08 cabin rentals, the recommendations are the same for PZ 2022-09. City staff find that the applicant meets the criteria for issuance of a conditional use permit as set forth in subsections E1 through E6 of KMC 1420-150, and hereby recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission approve the conditional use permit application subject to the following conditions. Condition 1, further development of the property should conform to all federal, state of Alaska, and local regulations. Condition 2, prior to starting any business operations, a landscape site plan must be reviewed and approved by the planning director. Condition 3, prior to beginning any construction or renovations, a building permit must be issued by the building official for the City of Kenai. Condition 4, a yearly conditional use permit must be submitted to the City of Kenai prior to the 31st day of December of each year. Condition 5, the applicant will meet with city staff for on-site inspections when requested. Condition 6, if there is a change of use for the above described property, a new conditional use permit must be obtained pursuant to KMC 1420-150 I-5. Condition 7, pursuant to KMC 1420-150I2, this permit shall expire automatically upon termination or interruption of the use for a period of at least 1 year. Condition 8, failure to provide documentation to the city for meeting these conditions shall be grounds for the suspension or revocation of the conditional use permit. And Condition 9, quiet hours are 10 p.m. to 6 p.m. That concludes my presentation. Happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Foster. Is the applicant online, or give him a chance to do a presentation if he's ready and willing?
Mr. Hosing, you can unmute at this time.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you. Go ahead.
My name's Tom Hazing. I submitted the conditional use permit application for my property at 1025 Angler Drive. I appreciate Ryan Foster's assistance with the application process. He was a big help there. I believe the application meets the criteria in the municipal code for conditional use permits. I understand the 9 conditions and attached to these permits. I don't see any conflict with those recommendation conditions and my intent to rent the property for seasonal lodging. I plan on using the Airbnb or VRBO platforms to accomplish that. So with that, I guess I'm available for any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. We will now, before we ask any questions of you, we'll open it up for public testimony. And then we'll get back to you after we get some testimony. So and anyone coming forward, again, as Mr. Foster stated, we are just going to deal with the public testimony for the cabin rentals first, and then for the guide service secondly. So anyone who wishes to come forward and speak to PZ 2022-08, please raise your hand, come forward, and we'll get the process started. And if I could get you to state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jim Richardson. I'm the 30-plus year-old property owner on the north side of this property, directly adjacent. I am opposed to this as written, and I'd like to explain that through 3 things. One is that what's wrong with the operation of this permit to date? Well, it doesn't have a permit, but it's operated for 3 years. I want to tell you what's wrong with that. I'd like to make suggestions for stipulations that you could make to try and clean up some of the evaluation and things and try and reduce problem. I'm a great believer that prevention of problems is way easier than fixing them after they occur. And third, I have some suggestions at the very end. I sent a letter, it's attached. It reflects my 3-year experience in dealing with this property as it's been operated and my 30-year perspective as a resident. So first of all, I appreciate that Mr. Hosing thinks that this has been operating in a great manner, but we're right next door and it's been a real problem. In the 30 years, the last 4 years have been just a living hell of operation, and it's because of one operator directly to the north of me. But unfortunately, he's the one that was selected to be the operator of this facility. And so we get traffic back and forth constantly all day, sometimes maybe a couple dozen trips per day, sometimes golf carts, sometimes trucks. People do not care any manner whatsoever about what the level of noise that they make. They come in with trucks, there are 2 golf carts that have speakers on top, loud enough to wake me up if I'm inside sleeping with the doors and windows closed, or leaving cars running for a couple hours while they work inside. And there's just been a lot of traffic. We've had trespass problems with people cutting back and forth. People that have been using this facility go to the entertainment nightclub tent at 10:05 to get drunk and make noise, and they come back and drive back and forth during that, getting louder through the course of the evening. And sometimes they just cut across our property. We've called the police a couple times. They've come out and they make a note, but they don't do anything. But it's a problem. This operation could operate without any problem whatsoever. Other businesses along Anglo Drive and elsewhere do, but it's because of the way that this is operated that it causes us problems, and they're severe problems. So I have, if you have my notes there, on the second page, I have several stipulations to this permit that I would like to see you make, not just on this, but on any commercial use permit. If you're saying 3 cabins and guides, what does that mean? Does that mean 1 cabin? Does that mean 20 cabins? Does that mean 1 guide? Does that mean 5 guides? There's a big difference. And each guide that comes in, and I'll deal with that on the second one, but people come and go, and it's a lot of traffic. But I am recommending that, was that 3 minutes?
I'll let you go for a bit. If you have any, I'm going to give everybody a chance to relook at these if they hadn't had a chance to before. So we can read this, and then maybe if you have anything else that I'll give you a minute or so here if you want to wrap it up. But we'll read this if you want to add anything else other than what you're reading here.
Okay, well, these 5 points here, I believe would be, if you could make some stipulations on a conditional use permit along the lines of what's ordered, they could operate a business and not cause a problem. Or if they do cause a problem, then the city has some recourse and they'll know how to address it. And then I guess the last thing I had here is that it would be really helpful to improve the coordination and communication between the City of Kenai and Planning and Zoning Commission. I've come in here with several permits like this over the past several years on Dolachek, 1050 Angler Drive, and people in the neighborhood are terrified of that because of the problems that we've been having with the one north of me, and they're allowed to do whatever they want and there's no comeback. So saying that you're going to have cabins and guides, if they start doing entertainment tents and nightclubs and drinking, that happens, and it all occurs outside of the description. So if you make the description better and put some stipulations on it saying, hey, if you get 10 calls of the police coming in because of noise disturbances, you're going to be called in for a revocation review. So that would be a big help, and that would have solved us on a case to the north. That would have solved a big problem. And I'm not suggesting you have to screen the manager. The existing manager on here sucks. But it's up to him.
We might have some questions for you, and you can maybe elaborate a little further. We'll see if any of the commissioners have any questions for Mr. Richardson. Vice Chair Dothett.
I just have a question. If my memory strikes me, and maybe I'm off by 1 or 2 properties, was this the previously owned, and was it run by Moby King? Is that the property?
No.
That was the different, that's where Foster's is now, is it roughly?
No, Foster's has had their property since his three brothers that owned it, and they bought it in 1988. And then they operated it. So it has never been, Moby King may have been one of the guides that operated there.
He ran out of this property, correct? This was probably 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah.
12,
This
20
property
years
that
ago?
we're talking about, the subject property has never had a guide operating.
Okay. But it had cabins
It has
prior
not-
to this owner, or
No,
no?
it was built as a retirement home, and the people that lived there more than 30 years.
Okay.
And one of them has since expired, and they sort of moved along, but they were
Okay.
great neighbors.
Okay. Yeah, I just wasn't curious. I could have sworn there was a dock there with a Moby King. I wasn't sure if it was being operated as cabins on that one previously or not. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yep, go ahead.
I'll be bold. I've been down here so many times, it's, I'm getting kind of tired of it, actually. Hey, my name's Jerry Huff, and people call me Rusty. I wrote a letter as well, and I don't know how many folks have read it. I'll go over a few of the high points. Basically, we're trying to protect our neighborhood from more what I call carpetbaggers that don't live here. They come here, they take, they make a mess, they raise hell, and they basically destroy our property values, number one, monetarily, and our quality of life. Where I've lived for 30 years, I built my house 30 years ago. And so when Mr. Foster here tells us there's no economic damage by these types of properties, I can tell you that after 30 years of cabin rentals and guide services has diminished my value of my property by, 100-fold. It's nothing like it was before. I realize things change and the city of Kenai wants an economic value, but Beaver Creek is saturated to the point where it's no longer a peaceful, quiet type of business that these people operate. They are high density, they're high traffic, people in and out all the time, people are on vacation, they're making noise. They don't mean to be rude, but in a lot of instances, it just comes off that way. And we have an operator that's gonna operate this property, or has been operating this property the way they have been for the last 3 years, and screaming on an intercom about their neighbors being effing assholes and all this other stuff. This guy is totally out of control. And he's managing this piece of property here. This property does not have a dock, so he's gonna be using Mr. Foster's dock as far as I can tell. And anybody that guides out of there will be running from Mr. Foster's property. Now, Mr. Foster has seen fit to operate his business without, he's not a registered guide, number one. He does not, he rents boats to people without park stickers. He serves alcohol without a liquor license. I could go on and on and on here. I don't understand how he gets away with it, but he does. And this piece of property is just one more branch of the problem that we have down there. And I know a lot of people, a lot of guide services down there and cabin rental people that are really good people, and they run their businesses clean, and they're good neighbors, but this guy is not one of them. This particular gentleman does not live here. He will not be operating it here. And in my view, that's a big no. Because he has no skin in the game. He doesn't have to answer to anybody. And when you go to the city for problems, it falls on deaf ears. So here again, we're back down here again trying to protect our neighborhood from this kind of crap. And I don't know where else to go from here. We talk about value, but to me, the value is in peace and quiet where I live. It's not about a few bucks. I could go on for hours, but I think you get the point.
See if anyone has any questions. Okay, I have just one. So
Okay.
the golf carts, speakers up and down, has that been brought up to the city? I know we're talking about something on a different piece of property, I believe, but so they're working back and forth between Mr. Richardson's place, right? So
No, they go from 10:05 to 10:25. They go around.
yeah, but you're sandwiched between it is what I'm saying. Yeah. So and again, more of the stuff that we're kind of hearing for the first time. I think maybe some of this was talked about with the problem at 10:05, but I didn't think it looped into 10:25. I guess is where I'm hearing it for the first time. Maybe now.
To
So
answer your question, Mr. Quaid, we were down here over the Dull Chuck situation before. We kind of went over all this junk before, and yet, the police have been called. The city manager's involved. The city attorney's been involved. This goes deep. And I don't know how much you folks know about it, but I would hope that you've been involved in this particular gentleman's business. It's not just that particular lot and the lot we're talking about now, but we're talking about cabins down the street that belong to Mr. Lowe. They're all in business together. And this guiding business is transformed from a king salmon type of a guiding business where they run 1 or 2 trips a day to a nonstop in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. They haul people up and down the creek in boats that aren't registered with the Park Service. I got photos in here I can show you. 7 people on a boat, no life jackets. The boat running like this up the creek. Guess who's driving the boat? our friend Jason Foster. So not only does he encourage that kind of activity, but he runs people in and out. They catch their limit, they come in, they drop it off, they takes them out again. Not only does he condone,
So-
he encourages this kind of activity.
And I believe you 100%.
Okay?
But that's not,
I understand.
yeah,
I'm
so
just telling
that
you-
I hope you guys do what you can do to take care of that a different way,
Well, I
but
mean,
we
this
can't
is
deal
just
with
the kind
that.
of business we're talking about.
Absolutely. I understand that 100%. Okay, I was just curious. I was trying to connect the two, and that helps me a little bit. So, anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, please come forward.
My name is Greg Anderson, and I live at 1110 Angler Drive. I've been on the peninsula for over 30 years and on Angler Drive for 25 years. I'm in opposition to this, issuing this conditional use permit, partially because of the city's inability to have any teeth when it comes to enforcing what's on the conditional use permits. I've seen this for years, that when issues come up where there's violations, nothing happens. There's no revocation from it. No one's ever had their permit taken on the street in the time that I've been there. And I've been there since when the Kenai used to be red hot and rocking with, you know, all the lodges were full and king trips going in and out, and like referenced, you know, 2 trips a day for some of these guys instead of what's going on now. I know that based on all of your guys' information that you've said, that what he's applying for checks all the boxes. But what my concern is that what's happened directly next door to me for a conditional use permit that you issued last year is that once this person gets this permit and then the scope of what he's operating there changes, what are you guys going to do to that? I get to look forward to this summer from after talking to Jason, and Jason Foster's the one who told me that he's going to be running Tom's Place. And this whole Airbnb thing is just a farce. So Jason told me, Brian even told me. So Brian Lowe. Brian's the one who has the place next to me. Apparently, I'm gonna have another big top tent like that's at 10005 because they've exceeded their capacity for serving food. Where in the application process does it say that big top, you know, catering is part of what our street is like? I mean, the whole dynamic is changing. Everything used to be really nice on our street, and now it just keeps getting worse and worse. And it's directly because of 3 participants. And I just hope that you guys look at, you know, this permit and, you know, if it follows like what was asked, if it follows suit just with what you guys stipulate, that's one thing. But I guarantee that is not going to be the case, based on the information that I've been told, you know, directly by participants. So I'm frustrated, you know, but at the same time, I'm fully expecting that you guys are going to issue this permit, just because it does check the boxes. But when things go south, what are you going to do about it? That's my question, because you haven't done anything yet. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Pikes.
So when the residents do complain and they do call law enforcement, what is some of the actions that law enforcement takes? If there's the stipulations on the conditional use permits to maintain a decorum and a sense of noise, are they removing them? Are they terminating the rentals? Are they towing vehicles away? Is there any action that the police are doing?
They basically tell the times that I've called, they tell them to quiet down, and then that's it. But does that have to happen 100 times before there's some sort of action? I mean, it's disturbing the quality of the neighborhood. And specifically, one of the conditions on here is it affecting adjoining neighbors? And it absolutely is.
So if you call at least 2 times and the previous applicant who testified calls 2 times and the next one, that's 6 phone calls and still nothing's being done.
Well, I know how many times I've called, and it's more than the 6 times that you just said. It's an ongoing issue. Our street, Beaver Creek used to be like, people would drive by on the Kenai and they'd look up into Beaver Creek and go, that's where all the high-end stuff is. And now, that's where all the pirates are. And that brings all of us, our neighborhood down.
So on that note, if it's my understanding, there's an easement towards the end of your street. So if the use is increasing on the street as far as traffic, what is the foot traffic in the location of that easement at the end of your street, or as people are entering and exiting the boats and stuff down by the docks? I think there's like a wetlands or a protected area at the end.
At the very end of our street, that is owned by,
Shuey?
yeah, by Shuey's.
Okay.
And it's all private property. There's no public access. It's all private property on Angler Drive. Everything on the creeks.
So I guess, is there increased activity down in that area as well?
Yes, because there's more properties or properties have.
Trespassing, I guess, is what I'm getting at. Is there an increase in trespassing onto the private properties?
There was for a time on their property specifically, but they since have posted no trespassing signs, and that basically has eliminated that.
Okay.
To my knowledge, I haven't spoke with them directly about that.
Okay.
I've spoken with them about other things, but not trespassing.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thanks for your time.
I got a couple of questions for you.
Okay.
If the applicant acted in good faith as this application is presented, am I hearing that you would be okay with that? Or,
Absolutely. I'm not opposed to businesses operating. It's as long as they're operating as far as what is stipulated on their permit. I am very much pro-business. I'm pro-Kenai. I'm pro-everything. Do I think that we've reached the tipping point as far as capacity? Yes. But at the same time, due to the comprehensive plan and the fact that his application and Mr. Foster's assessment of all of this is that it still fits in the box. Okay? So I can't oppose that. I can't. That's everyone's right to be able to do that. It's just when everything starts going, there's boundaries to that, and based on what I've seen so far, is that boundary is simply put in place, or the boundary works only at the beginning. Once the permit is achieved, after that, it's Katie bar the door, here we go.
and I will say, I think in defense of the police department and law enforcement, when they go down there or get a call to go down there, they aren't equipped with where conditional use permits are in place or not. I don't think that even hits their radar screen. Maybe that's something that we could work on. But I think they're just going to go down there and say, be quiet or whatever the complaint is, and not look at violations of a conditional use permit. So, again, maybe somewhere that the city needs to get better at policing it.
For the number of years that this has been going on, that seems like that should be pretty common information. We're not talking about a mega metropolis here.
Agreed. Some of the police officers are pretty new to though. Depending on who gets there, they may not have as big of a clue to that as we do because we see it and hear about it a lot more. But anyway, Vice Chair Dothett.
So it seems like a lot of the complaints aren't necessarily coming from the actual application for the permit and what the permit is going to allow. It seems like it's the process after the fact and the enforcement of the permit, which is what we were hearing before. What can we do? What is the meat and potatoes of enforcement on these? And it's after the fact of these permits getting issued that seems to be causing the most anger of that there you don't feel there's any enforcement. And that's where I'm seeing what needs to be addressed is maybe the enforcement side of things, which we've changed some things in the process for applications now. We've made forward progress in that, making progress there. But as far as the application itself, that's not so much the issue. Possibly the issue being, of course, that the other individuals that have a possible seated need to use this property is kind of causing more animosity for this particular permit because of the possibility of them working together or knowing that they're going to be working with another property owner that's already abused their permit so much. But it seems like to me, it seems like it's more of the unknown and the lack of teeth in the process after the fact of these permits being issued than it is necessarily exactly this permit in the process we're here in. Right.
Catch-22. I'm up here because I would like to not see this permit happen just because of the increased traffic. But at the same time, I'm also a businessman and I understand what that means. And again, you guys, if you issue this permit, that's my question. What are you going to do to enforce it when things go south? So it's a blanket statement, I guess. I'm not asking for a direct, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. Because at this point, I haven't seen anything. And talk means nothing. It's action. Once there's some action, that's when things happen. Being accountable.
And I will say this, that we have made some changes since there's been updates to the policies and how it works. And one of the big things is, as commissioners now, we get notified when there are violation letters sent out. We get notified when there's complaints and violations have been issued. We used to not have that information. That's happened since this last issue with the Foster's cabins. So I will say that as commissioners, we were out of the loop a lot on what exactly the issues were being happened. There was a gap there. But that is hopefully going to be closed because we, in our packets, when we get these violations and they are issued, we now see that. So when it comes to renewals, when they are up for renewal, we can keep that in consideration. So I will say that there has been, nothing didn't come out of the last issues of these. And there has been updates and there's been forward. Is there still room for improvement? Yes. But there has been forward movement. It's not been stagnant for last year. It hasn't been in the last 6 months. We've made changes to how things are done, how the application processes have been changed, and what we get notified and how we can hopefully start to resolve these things and make it better. So I do want to let you know there has been some changes. It's not been stagnant completely. In the last 6 or 8 months, I think we've made quite a few changes to the application themselves, and we could highlight and let you know what we've changed if that's something you want to talk about a later date too.
Yeah. And that's this is a broader discussion. I understand that. So again, I appreciate the platform to be able to at least come up and express my views.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
All right.
Thank you. Next.
I will. Be bold like Rusty. My name is Max Paget. I'm 855 Ames Road. So I want to represent Ames, not Angler, and more importantly, Beaver Creek. I'm unlike Mr. Anderson, I'm not in this for the business. I tell people I'm unemployed, but I'm really retired. We bought the property on Beaver Creek for access to Beaver Creek and for all the things that it gives us. We've enjoyed it. We've been there 30 years. It has, as Mr. Anderson said, the quality, and Mr. Huff, quality has deteriorated with these high volume operators. There's some very, very good operators on Beaver Creek. The ones that we've been talking about are not them. And I would encourage you folks as commissioners, when you see conditional use permits that are for Angler, for Ames, for Dalchuck, don't think about it as a street. It's Beaver Creek. Beaver Creek is what ties us together. So yes, the only thing we have is to fight these issues right here at the inception. Because as Commissioner Dothert says, yes, you're making some improvements, but once a permit is approved, that's it. So I would strongly encourage you to read the letters that these folks have written, pay attention to what they said, and when other permits come up for Beaver Creek, or for Angler, or for these aforementioned streets, think about it as Beaver Creek. Our quality of life on Beaver Creek and the use that we purchased it for has drastically deteriorated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah, let's see if anyone's got a question. I got one for you.
All right, Jeff, or Mr.
Oh.
Commissioner Twitch.
So this property, the one that the application is for, has been operating for, I believe I heard 3 years. Are you familiar with it as far as how it was operated in these last 3 years, or is it just because you're a little bit removed from it? But
No, you're not removed from it. We go by it multiple times a day during the season. We were familiar, had a casual relationship with the previous owners. That particular piece of property struck me as one of the most picturesque and typical Alaska cabins available the first time I saw it in the 80s. The previous owners have moved on. We noticed that there was a change. As you have heard, the real problem as it is at 10005 Angler. We have issues that we have to deal with there. And the reason we're trying to deal with the issue proposed here at 1025 is because we are all concerned that it's going to fall into the same footprint. So rather than dealing with 3 current problems on Angler, we encourage you to make it so we only have to deal with 2.
thank you. That does, absolutely. Looks like no one else. We're good. Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify to PZ 2022-08?
You got 20 minutes. I just keep right on going, but I know you won't let me.
Yeah, and we'll see if we got, I'm sure we've got some people online that will want to speak again, so we'll see.
If there's anyone on Zoom that wants to testify, you can unmute it this time.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Jason Foster, 1005 Angler Drive. I don't attend a lot of these, but I would definitely encourage everybody to research any actual complaints that have actually had any merit to them at all for our location. We are not the kind of operator that the other people that have been up there say that we are. It's we've ran a really nice business there, and people really enjoy it very much. The city has used some teeth to keep us in a correct path. They have shown some enforcement on making sure that we are abiding by the neighbors, but every neighbor's different. Some neighbors don't appreciate it. Some neighbors do. So I just think that as we proceed with this stuff, everybody's pointing the finger at me that's standing up behind that counter, but it is really one side of the argument, and I just want to remind everybody of that.
All right. Any questions? Yep. Vice Chair Dothett.
Mr. Foster, is there, are you going to be operating these cabins with the condition that we've talked about? Is that true that you'll be the operator of these cabins?
No, the intent of these cabins is just like it has been the last 2 years and not 3 years. They'll be listed on Airbnb for rent and VRBO. That's the platform that it's operated under. And Tom's there in about half the summer. The other half the summer that he's not there, we take care of that place for him. And as far as operations, we are not allowed to accommodate anybody from other properties onto our property. Our property is the one that we're going to be operating. Other properties on Angler Drive, others besides Tom's even, we I don't know if manage is the right word, because because we turn over the rooms when they need it, or we greet the people when they need it, or we answer their questions. That's all it is. There's no speakers on any golf carts. There's golf carts that go back and forth between the different properties to help people with their luggage or their fish boxes or anything like that. It is a very professional business.
As far as the illegal guiding stuff, I would challenge anybody to come down there and even find a boat that's even in my name. I don't have a boat in my name. I was on the river 3 times last year. But, you know, I mean, again, the gist of this is just to make sure that you guys know that there's 2 sides to every story, and usually the truth lies somewhere in between them.
Any follow-up, Mr. Dothert? Are you good?
That's fine. So there's not like a written contract where you'll be operating these cabins, which it sounds like it's a lot of hearsay on who's doing what, and it's just trying to make sense here, like you said, both sides, as far as what's going on there. So that's what I was curious, if there was a written agreement where you're going to be the manager of these cabins and putting up clients in them and that kind of thing, or not. And that's kind of what I was looking for.
If we have overflow to put in the cabins and there's an opening on the Airbnb calendar, then we would probably put clients in, just like we would anywhere up and down the road. And other operations up and down the road, but they're overflow in our cabins as well.
So I'm going to ask a question. This is Mr. Twait. So are you compensated then at all to do any work there, or change out the rooms and all that, or trying to figure out what the relationship is exactly?
Yes, we are compensated to change out the rooms and you know, and doing the upgrades on the property. Of course, I've been in dirt work my whole life, and so as that property's been enhanced, you know, we do a lot of that work for Tom. Is that what you're asking?
Yep, that answers it. Thank you. Commissioner Fikes.
So, Mr. Foster, you're at 1005, and you have a conditional use for that property right now?
That's correct.
And so the applicant that's before us now, he's been operating without a conditional use permit for the last 2 years. Have you been assisting him during that 2-year period?
So operating is not accurate. It's been listed on Airbnb and VRBO, and the guests that come in to stay on Airbnb, VRBO, like they do everywhere else in the city.
So, Mr. So it's my understanding that you have a conditional use permit, and you chose to fill out an application, and you chose to present it to the city for approval. But this particular individual chose not to do that for 2 years. And you're saying that you assisted him during those 2 years. And you said that you collected rents or you collected fees for work that you did for this applicant. Is that true?
Okay, so this is Cindy Hanna. Me and Jason run the cabins at 1005. Yes, we are assisting him, as many Airbnbs have like managers that take care of them. A lot of times it's not the actual owner that does it. I have his places listed on Airbnb, and I charge a cleaning fee. And the cleaning fee goes to me because I'm the one cleaning it. So, I mean, this was simply an Airbnb. They said the city wrote a letter and said, you know, you can't have an Airbnb without a conditional use permit. I did talk to Ryan Foster, and Ryan said that it is the city's intent that everybody that has an Airbnb in the city of Kenai, that they get a conditional use permit.
So, right, I agree 100%. I'm just confused that you would want to follow the procedure as you stated and understand it, but this individual didn't, I guess. That's what I'm struggling with.
Well, we have a different operation.
Yeah, and I'm going to interrupt.
Can I clarify something here?
Yeah, and I'm going to just interrupt because, like I said, you could certainly be working for them and not know that they didn't have one filed. So I exactly agree with what Commissioner Fikes is bringing up, but I think that's maybe a question for the property owner.
I'd like to respond. If
yeah, I'll let you in a second.
Owner, Tom Hazen.
Hold on one second. I'm just going to make sure there's nobody else that has any questions for Mr. Foster or Ms. Hanna. think we are good. So, okay, if you'd like to go ahead and address that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, well, prior to purchasing that property, I went to the city planning director. I believe Liz Appleby was her name, and I asked her specifically if I needed a conditional use permit for that property, for what I intended to do, and she told me that I did not need a conditional use permit. So fast forward here to, last fall, I guess it was, when I get a letter from Ryan that stated I was in violation of the city ordinance there. I called him and I said, that I met with Miss Appleby and I asked her if I needed a conditional use permit. She said no. And he said that now a conditional use permit is required. I don't know if the city changed their ordinance there or if Miss Appleby was mistaken, or the first year and a half that I owned, I leased the place to QAP, which was the outfit that did the Beaver Creek or the Beaver Loop Road improvements. So the property hasn't been operated for 3 years without a conditional use permit. I guess it has, but my understanding that it wasn't necessary. So I guess I have a question. Was Miss Appleby mistaken? Has something changed, regarding the conditional use permits in Airbnb rentals, or what is the situation?
I will defer that to Mr. Foster, but I believe I would say that they were always required in there. But I'll let Mr. Foster add to that if he needs to.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Yeah, it's my understanding that the cabin rentals has not changed for some time as a requirement for conditional use permit. And unfortunately, I'm not privy to the conversation or the scenarios that Mr. Hosting might have had with my predecessor. So I really just can't say what happened in that conversation.
So I have a question for you, I guess, then. I don't see the first letter you were given. The second notice is in our packet. So what happened between the first notice and the needing to issue a second one? Were you in contact with the city at that point, or what seemed to necessitate a second letter?
Well, I guess the property was shut down. I was in Alaska, actually, and the letter was sent to my property in Nebraska. And I was in the process of shutting down winterizing the property. So there wasn't any activity going on with the property. And I wasn't exactly sure what my intention, or what if I was going to apply or continue with cabin rentals this year.
Okay, so you weren't aware of this until you went back to Nebraska then?
That's correct.
Okay. Commissioner Fikes.
You mentioned earlier in your testimony that you've been advertising on Airbnbs. How long has that been going on?
Probably a year and a half here, I would guess.
So that would be before the permit was issued?
Yes.
I have a question. You mentioned you had a long-term lease I'm assuming it was a long-term lease of some kind to the road construction crew that was working on it, correct?
Yeah.
And was that the time frame when you were using that lease to the road construction crews? Might have been considered nightly, but it was probably a longer term than that. Was that the time you talked to Miss Appleby?
No, it was prior to my purchasing the property. I went to the city because I wanted to make sure I was in compliance with the city ordinance there. I didn't have any intention of doing an end around, I went there with the intention of finding out what was necessary.
So what I was getting at is that if it was a long-term lease agreement that you were looking at purchasing the property and leasing it for more than 30 days at a time to a set individual, then that would not have required a conditional use permit, via my understanding. But when it changes, when you're going to more than nightly and less than 30 days, that would be the conditional use permit would be required. Is that correct? Mr. Foster?
Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait, Vice Chair Douthit. That's correct. So to go back to the definition of cabin rentals, that's for dwelling units, buildings providing overnight sleeping accommodations for a period of less than 30 consecutive days. So 30 days or more at a time would not require the conditional use permit for a cabin rental.
And that's what I was getting at. It might have been confusing if that was brought up that you were looking at that. I don't know if that was the case or not. And that lease that you were looking at for the road construction crew may have been more than 30 days. That might have been part of the confusion. I don't know if that was brought up during Mrs. Appleby's conversation or not.
Well, that was along with I explained to her my entire intentions there was to rent to those people long-term. And while I made improvements to the property and get it up to, up to the standards there that I'd expect if I was going to rent some property. And then I told her I was going to transition into seasonal. Maybe she misunderstood me, but I certainly didn't hide any of my intentions.
All right. We'll see if anyone has any more questions for you. I don't see any, so thank you very much. And I'll go back out into the public here. Anyone that hasn't testified wishing to come forward.
If there's anyone on Zoom that would like to testify at this time, you can unmute, and if you are on the phone, you can press *6 to unmute.
All right, it doesn't appear we have any more, so I will close the public hearing. And if I could, I will want to take a little 5-minute at ease in case anyone besides myself who didn't get a real good chance to read these letters. We'll read them and then we'll come back and start our deliberating. So we'll take 5 minutes. All right, we are back on the record, and we have a motion and a second before us. We'll bring it back for discussion, deliberation. Mr. Foster, you want to start off by chatting a bit?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Twait. I did want to just note a couple things about code enforcement, specifically to conditional use permits, just because it was brought up earlier, so I just want to provide just a little bit more information how that works. Last year, roughly halfway through the year, there were some updates to the code for conditional use permits, and one of them is, as planning director, I provide notification to the commission when there are code violations for conditional use permits. And we have a ballpark of probably about 100 or so conditional use permits in the entire city. So, a fair number to review on a regular basis. But I would say, a few things is that in that time with that code change, there's been 3 times where I've brought to the commission that properties that had conditional use permits, and actually in this case needed a conditional use permit, and that this was something that was ongoing, and provided that letter to inform the commission. And so when it comes to enforcement, we are complaint driven. Katie, the assistant planner, and myself, we're the only code enforcement officers for the city. So we wear a lot of hats. We do planning and zoning, and we do GIS and lands management and so on. So really, as far as the code enforcement side, typically how it works, it is complaint driven. When we receive a complaint about a property, we do investigate. We do need to verify that complaint as well. We need to have evidence for that, and if we are able to verify, then we provide that code violation letter to a property owner that has a conditional use permit. And really what that is, that's citing the code, but it's giving, per our code for conditional use permits, it's giving that permit holder and that property owner the opportunity to come up with some type of remedy, some type of remediation. So it's really, it kind of puts the ball in the conditional use permit holder's court at that time to say, hey, we've verified, we've noticed that there's a code violation, and we give a time frame of which to provide us notice of what their intentions are on remedying that. Now, what I will say is, in the time that I've been with the city, which is a little over a year, there haven't been any conditional use permits that have come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission for revocation. But that is a possibility. If at some point with a code violation letter for a conditional use permit holder, that violation isn't remedied, that at some point it's possible to have that come back before the commission for revocation. And that's all. This is all just existing code. So that was brought up. So I wanted to shed just a little bit more light on how that works. And then the last thing I just wanted to note was, it's in the name, a conditional use permit. And so the conditions that I provide via my staff report and draft resolution, these are just recommendations to the commission based on my review of my staff report and my understanding. And then these conditions are important, for a enforcement, if you will, for a permit and for a permit holder. And I'll end on that the commission can really take what I provide, can change it, can remove it, can add conditions. And I will say, when it comes to sort of the management of conditional use permits, it is helpful to have conditions in reviewing or enforcing, a permit. So I'll end on that, and happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you. All right, Commissioner Askin.
I have a couple questions for Mr. Foster. Number one, how many properties are there between 1005 and 1025 Angler? Is there just one property between the two?
Through the chair, Commissioner Askin, I believe it's one, but actually, let me just check the map real quick. Yes, the one property.
Okay. And then, if we were to add stipulations, as a condition of approving this, do we do that through motion, through our discussion? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Greenberg.
I believe that there were a few violations issued over the past winter. Is that correct? In this area?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Greenberg, there was one other, yes, that was on Angler Drive.
So have we gone through like a summer season to see what the effect of those violations has been? Because I know you've done a great job of actually, going out there and doing this code enforcement and issuing these violations. So the teeth that we haven't seen in the past, the planning director has been working hard to actually follow up on these things. So we haven't really seen the results. Is that
Mr. Foster?
Oh, through the chair, Commissioner Greenberg.
Is it fair to say?
So since the fall, since early fall, and again, that code changed, I don't know the exact time, but it was roughly midway in the year. There were three, two on Angler and one on, I think it was North Forest. What I will say is two of them have been remedied, and this would be the third. And because of that enforcement, because of that code change, is partially the reason why we're even here this evening. So what I would say, it's a small snapshot. Hasn't been a full year that new code change has been in place, but there is a little snapshot of where we've been, diligent about enforcement and informing the commission.
So efforts have been made in this particular area over the course of the past year to do more enforcement. That's true to say. But we just don't know the results. So what people are asking for, the city's been working on doing, we've been working on doing. We don't know the results, but additional efforts have been made. That's really all I can say.
Thank you. Commissioner Fikes.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Foster, has there been any input or any attempt to go through the logs or get any history from the police department as far as complaint calls? Has there anything been recorded or any kind of input provided from?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Fikes. No, there hasn't been any request as far as records for any police calls to the property.
Anyone else? Commissioner Halstead.
Well, I've seen, I know that we are making strides in trying to make this a better enforcement, but I think with the resources that we have, I don't think that we're able to meet those enforcement requirements. And I think because of that, and the information that I've been given, looking at the review criteria, my findings are that we don't meet several criteria in the application process. Criteria number 2, the economic and non-economic value of the adjoining property and neighborhood will not be significantly impaired. I feel that it's been discussed and brought to our attention through several of the neighborhood there that is affecting their non-economic value of the adjoining property and neighborhood. Criteria 3, the proposed use being in harmony with the comprehensive plan. Again, I think that it is, it's been proven that it is not an acceptable neighborhood atmosphere that people would want to be a part of. And again, criteria number 5, the proposed use will not be harmful to the public safety, health, or welfare. Failing those criterias, I will be in opposition of this. That is all.
Thank you, Mr. Halstead. Commissioner Woodard.
I totally agree with Commissioner Halstead and I too will be voting no.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dothett.
I will disagree with that, and the fact that what is proposed, like we had testimony to, what the actual stipulations that are proposed, and I think with some more teeth for enforcement, adding some of the recommended parameters that were given to us in some of the letters to allow for more enforcement, and what is proposed does meet those standards, and I'll be in favor of it, but I do believe that there is more room for enforcement and ability to enforce, and I would not want it as exactly proposed until we add some stipulations as far as noises and possibly guest limitations and those kind of things, so that we can use the tools that the city has to hopefully make that stronger. So not to say no, but I will be saying yes, but I would want to add some more stipulations in this before I would say yes to it.
Thank you. Commissioner Halstead.
Just to clarify, again, I would agree that with additional stipulations and additional enforcement, that this would be an acceptable plan. But my issue that I have at the moment is that we do not have the ability to enforce this, even if we added other stipulations into that. I don't believe that we have the resource available to enforce every conditional use permit much as we'd like to.
Commissioner Askin.
Mr. Dothett, what kind of suggestions do you have for additional stipulations?
I'll tell you what, I'm going to have him hold off on that and let Commissioner Fikes go first if she had some comments.
Based on the testimony I've heard here and in the past for this general neighborhood, in this general use that's come before us in the past, whether it's this applicant or others, it seems to be the continued theme, and not just the continued theme of seasonal residents. It's long-term residents with history of how the city has enforced it, how the city has either accepted or rejected the conditional uses. And based on this particular applicant's history and the fact that he chose not to have one, but for whatever description or understanding or misunderstanding, and the fact that he's not going to be present at the location, it's, like Mr. Halstead said, the enforcement mechanism I don't believe is there. I don't agree with the harmony of the neighborhood is going to be kept up. And from the testimony of the long-term tenants, it sounds like the value in their neighborhood is greatly diminished. And I haven't really heard from law enforcement or anybody to say where that the conditional use permits will be revoked after 1 violation, 2 violations, or 3 violations, or who's to say when you have no record and you have no criteria. And I've served on this commission for many years, and just in the short 6 months that you have been on the commission, and you've, Mr. Foster, there's been some changes, but not many. And so I don't feel confident in agreeing with this particular application, so I'm opposed to it.
Thank you. Vice Chair Dothett.
As far as the stipulations, is that where we're back to, I believe?
Yeah.
Well, as far as going back to, trying to figure out.
And maybe if you want to get your thoughts together, I have a question. Yeah, go ahead. And then I have a question for Mr. Foster as well. Since there isn't a existing conditional use permit that we're transferring or anything like that, I noticed one of the criteria that we had, or conditions I should say, was quiet time from 10 to 6. Now, is that something that normally we've added those on our own? Is that something that we're going to put in as a condition to start with these things, or I'm just curious how we came about that?
Yeah, Chair Twait. That was something I'd noticed in the time that I've been here, more recent theme for other cabin rentals, as well as dormitories, that came up as a concern. And I thought that with the layout of the property, these again are narrow properties, and trying to provide that access to the creek, And because there are many narrow properties, it just means folks are a little bit closer together. So I did think that in this particular case, it was relevant to add that in as again my recommendation, and it is something that I've seen that's come up in other cases more recently.
Very good. I agree with that. I was just curious because I know we've added them when there hasn't been any. So that, again, maybe a change that we're getting to down the road that's a positive one. You ready, Mr. Dothett?
Yeah, I think
Sure, go ahead.
So as per the letter that was submitted to us from Mr. and Mrs. Paget, they put a few things in there as far as stuff that they would like to see as stipulations in this, and that time came up. They said 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. I believe the other properties in there is the 10 to 6 or 10 to 5 in that area would go more commonly with the other permits we've done. So that would be one stipulation. I could definitely see the noise for silence there. And then as far as another stipulation would be with the property manager, I could see, we need a local contact, so possibly somebody that would be responsible locally that if we had a concern or complaints, that we have somebody locally to contact, whether it's when the actual property owner be here, he would be in charge of that, but some kind of a property manager in writing that says this person is responsible for adhering to make sure the stipulations are. I agree with that.
So let me interrupt you. Do we want to make these as a motion?
I don't know if it's a motion or if Mrs. Askin was looking for what I was
Oh, yeah, maybe
asking.
she'll make those motions. Huh? Okay, good. All right, yeah, carry on.
So I think that was just some of the suggestions. I was looking down the list here. So the noise, a manager of some sort, and then I don't know what would be possibly limiting the guest numbers or guest sizes to the cabins, but I think that comes down to beds, number of beds. Maybe that would go back to Mr. Foster on that one. I'm not sure what kind of stipulation we could do for number of guests on that property.
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Dothett, that's a good question. What I would say is, that is a condition that the commission could consider, crafting for that. I'm trying to think if there's been any other kind of cases that's been provided for. I would say there are other conditional use permits, somewhat similar to this. Where the capacity has been noted to be limited to the number of cabins that are there. And I suppose if the commission did want to explore, what that capacity is for these cabins, that could be something the commission could craft.
So it would be something we could ask the owner how many beds are in these cabins and then stipulate per bed numbers, that would be the maximum allowable, correct? Possibly, if we do that. I'm just trying to go down the list of recommendations for them and trying to meet as many as we could at this point. As far as the trespass issue, that would come, I would think, with more of that's an enforcement issue with law enforcement as far as trespass. We could put it as stipulation, but it should be assumed as it's already in law. You can't trespass on somebody's property, so I don't know that that's a stipulation we need to get involved in. But those are the three main ones that I could see putting on there. Definitely the time, manager, so we have somebody here to contact for issues, and then possibly the number of clients on the property. Those are the three main ones I would look at.
Anyone else? Commissioner Greenberg.
You mentioned before about the revocation process. What does that look like?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Greenberg, the Kenai Municipal Code for conditional use permits has a process for that. The process that I've been involved in to date only goes so far in that process, and that's when receiving a complaint to investigate, verify, and at that point be able to cite a code violation. And with that code violation letter, as noted earlier, it's really put on the conditional use permit holder to notify, determine, and notify staff what it is that they are proposing to do to remedy that. What I would say, again, per the code, the code is essentially it doesn't give hard dates. It doesn't say, that it needs to be resolved within 30 days. It states that it needs to be done within a reasonable time. And with that direction, I do give firm dates in the letters to provide a response by. And again, that's the response to how are you as the property owner and the permit holder going to resolve your code, violation? And that's really the core of what I'm looking to do in the code enforcement, is just make sure that they're code compliant. If no remedy is made in a reasonable time, then in that point that I could recommend that that permit comes before the Planning and Zoning Commission for a hearing to consider revocation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Halstead.
One of the issues that I had thought about when this came up on our last similar type scenario was the time that it takes for enforcement. Whether there's a complaint that's been made, it's been investigated through Mr. Foster, through whoever, we write up a notice of violation, the time that it takes to get that certified and mailed, and they've got their response time back, a certification of remediation or whatever. But in the time that's gone, especially on a seasonal type position like that, we've spanned the entire, season of whatever that activity is. So if I'm running a lodge in the first month or whatever, or second month, or first month, I've gotten a violation. By the time I'm being submitted to remediate or resolve that issue, my noise complaint's done because I'm done for the summer. So that again is another issue that I think when it comes to enforcement on our end, unless we speed up that process, they can violate all they want, because by the time it comes for them to resolve it, they're done for the season. And I know that it would affect them on the following year, but it could be a whole other set of circumstances where, that was the guy last year and I don't have him in my camp anymore, and then they can repeat as needed.
Thank you. Commissioner Fikes?
I just had a concern about, limiting the number of guests. It's kind of subjective when you're talking about you're going to do rentals based on a nightly basis, based on a weekly basis, and then somebody has a complaint, and you come out and you go, well, who's the registered guest? And, well, he's just the one dropping them off, and, well, he's checking out tonight, and I just can't see where that could be enforced. Like Mr. Halstead said, you circle back and you have no mechanism here, and this is the problem that keeps repeating itself. And I've been an experienced person up here having to hear these comments, and we finally have an opportunity to try and address it. I am not against guide services or cabin rentals, but there's been a definitive shift. It is no longer a harmonious residential rural area with families, lights out at 6, quiet time at 10, and we all get up at 6 and we go fish. That's a family outing that is shifted into a free-for-all big event, party on, let's go, where's the keg, and hey, let's jump in the back of the truck and grab the four-wheeler, and oh my God, you fell off. Oh well, it's just a wild time out there, as you might see at a campground. But we have said this is a rural residential area. These are homes. It's not a campground. And so we have an opportunity to keep that harmony as we stated in the land use. And that's why I'm opposed to this. Until we have a better mechanism, I don't think it's prudent to keep approving these.
Thank you. I guess everybody else has kind of voiced their opinion. I have not yet. I will do that now, I guess. When I look at this application, to me it looks no different than several others that we have approved in the past. But for me, the difference is the fact that we changed the criteria last year. Vice Mayor Malloy kind of was behind the idea of using the economic and non-economic value. And I think this one, to me, speaks to the non-economic value. And I don't know that that's a long-term problem in my head. I think with the other property, and we got to keep them separate because 1005 is certainly different than 1025. But we did make some changes there, and I think this season we'll see if those changes come about, and if the enforcement is there and the compliance is there and the neighborhood feels a little better about the neighborhood again. And so, in my opinion, the best approach that I see in this thing is to vote against it at this point, with the idea that we watch this change that we've done. We've increased some enforcement. Well, we haven't really even increased any enforcement. We have a mechanism to be able to see it a little clearer, and we need to continue to get the enforcement out there, and that, of course, relies on some of the complaint-driven neighbors to do that. But I'm hoping, I feel like the property at 1005 is going to be considerably better this year, and I would encourage this applicant to reapply. I know it doesn't help him for this building season or this summer season, but it's one season. He can probably rent them long-term and not be economically hurt too awful bad by that at all. But I just feel like I trust these people out here, and you can see that their quality of life, I feel like, is being compromised. And before this non-economic value was a criteria, we didn't have that opportunity to say that's a criteria we can deal with. We do now, and I guess the ironic part is, had they got their application in a year ago, we wouldn't be able to use that as a factor. So I'll be voting against it, with the stipulation and encouragement that I hope that in a year from now or this winter, apply for it again, and if the quality of life improves this year, then we maybe can look at this in a different light next year. So that's my opinion. I'll be voting against it. Any other conversation? Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, I just want to say that really not issuing what appears to be a valid permit in the anticipation of a violation that hasn't occurred yet, because of the presumption that the city can't handle enforcing it, is a dangerous precedent, and it could discourage permits from happening in the city. That's all I have to say.
Commissioner Woodard.
One of the problems I have is that the property at 1005 or whatever it is, the Foster, we're watching him to see how he responds to the violations that he did have, and yet the new property is wanting him to be his manager. And so we don't even know how the other property is going to handle it for this year, and we're expecting him to handle two properties now. So that's a problem for me.
Vice Chair Dothett.
I guess we haven't actually heard from the owner as far as who he wanted to manage the property officially, if he's going to name that. So that would be an assumption, I think, that he's going to have him. I think the waters have been muddied by one individual in this situation, and I think the waters are getting muddied for other individuals in this area by that. And I don't necessarily, I'm not saying I don't agree with the behavior and the stuff and the violations. I don't agree with that at all from 105, but we're starting to muddy waters into other areas, and I think that's where we're assuming a lot of things, and that's where I'm at with Mr. Greenberg on that, is that we're opening a lot of gray area here as far as the permit and ifs and whats and who's and maybes might happens. And as far as letter of law, can we ask the owner a quick question? If he were to have a manager, who he'd be planning on managing? That we might ask that question.
Yeah, we can do that.
Are they online now? Can we ask
Yeah.
them that question?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm here. I guess, your definition of manager is that, would be, Cindy, Hannah is the one that's cleaning the property in my absence and, she's letting people in and checking them out and that type of stuff. I guess that would be considered a manager, I just like to say that I have multiple properties in multiple states here, and I rent properties for a living, and I've got zero problems with my neighbors, not one. So I guess from my perspective, I'd like to see, when people come in and testify there to the council and make these wild accusations about, these parties and trespassing and all this stuff, where's their burden of proof? Mr. Richardson gets up there and says he's a lifelong resident of, the area. Well, that's not true. He doesn't live there. He's like me. He's an absentee owner, a vagabond, or whatever we're referred to, So I just want to be judged on my property and what happens, on my property. And I think there should be a burden of proof on people that go in there and make these wild accusations on stuff that's just not true. I mean,
Thank you. So, as in response to the question, the manager that you're saying right now would be is that Mr. Foster's wife, I believe, is what you're saying?
Cindy Hannah, yes.
Okay. Thank you for that.
All right. Mr. Dothett.
With going off the burden of proof and not having the information at hand as far as police reports and stuff, and other violations that have come apart on this particular property, is that something we could obtain and take this up at a later meeting? So we know what
Are you asking me?
violations have occurred on this property?
No, this is for Planning Director Foster. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
Through the chair, Vice Chair Dothett, that is something that could be requested.
Just as a question, another thought is that we want to see what violations, they should have record of different calls gone to those properties, and we can put the whole stipulation, he said, she said, that's a burden of proof we could use if we wanted to, is request those records for a further meeting on this.
Commissioner Fikes.
I think we've heard enough testimony from the audience. We've had a thorough packet and an application. We've heard from the applicant, and we had a robust discussion up here on the commission that I feel prepared to vote.
Okay, I guess I would ask the other commissioners if they think the decision would be swayed by having a little more information from calls and disturbance calls, things of that nature. Commissioner Halstead.
I agree with Ms. Fikes. I think we've had plenty of information presented to us and given to us. I do, I guess I kind of like the idea of having the ability to kind of vet some information and also give time to, work on the conditions of the actual conditions on the conditional use permit. But my original statement before, I think our bigger issue is with enforcement. And the only thing that we can get to resolve that is see how well these other, how our enforcement handles out this year before compounding an issue potentially.
Commissioner Askin.
I too agree that I think we've heard enough testimony on both sides. I don't believe that requesting violations is going to sway me one way or, from where I'm standing now. I also think that while it's been stated that there's concern that people won't apply for permits, I think there comes a time where we have to draw a line in the sand, and we're going to have to start making sure that we can enforce violations. because this complaint is long-standing and deep, and I think we need to change it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Vice Chair Dothett, do you want to entertain a motion to postpone to the next meeting?
It sounds like the already got kind of unanimous consent to say no, that we don't want to hear anything about the police reports. So I guess we are not going to go for any modifications to this permit, and I guess we will move forward with the vote as is. Is that what I'm getting?
I would say yes, unless we do want to add any extra conditions if we want to go down that road. Certainly would entertain that if we wanted to.
I guess I would go ahead and make a motion to add the possibility of 3 conditions that we discussed earlier.
So,
Can we do them all 3 at once, or no?
No, let's move them separately.
okay. And the last condition we have is what number?
We have 9 conditions, so this would be adding a 10th condition.
Adding 10. And actually, I think number 9 is the quiet hours, so I don't know, do we want to modify that one, or are we good with 10 to 6?
I would just be curious, on the other properties, I know we had the cabin rentals kind of across the street. It was 5 a.m., I believe, for the fishing business side of that. So if we were to modify it, I would move to modify that to the 5 a.m. consistent with the other properties in the area.
Okay. Do I have a second?
A second.
All right. Any discussion?
Seems,
Commissioner Halstead?
keep them just like the other one. I like that idea.
Okay. Anybody else? All right. Seeing none, please call the roll.
All right, can I just clarify? So are we,
Um,
it's 10 p.m. to 5 a.m.?
5 a.m.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Commissioner Askin?
No.
Commissioner Fikes?
No.
Commissioner Halstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard?
No.
Vice Chair Dothett?
Yes, for the noise.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Chair Twait?
Yes.
All right, you have 4 yes votes, so motion passes.
All right. Vice Chair Dothett.
The other one we discussed, making a motion to add having an on-site manager or somebody who is going to be responsible in-state, on-site, either an on-site manager or the property owner present while in operation.
And that'll be condition 10. Okay. So not necessarily living on site, but present daily. Leave it something to that.
A manager present.
Okay.
It wouldn't have to be, because I don't know if there's actually housing, it doesn't sound like on this, but if you had at least a local property management
Okay.
for contact.
All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Fikes?
No.
Commissioner Halstead?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dothett?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Chair Twait?
Yes.
Commissioner Askin?
No.
No, motion passes.
Okay. One more?
One more stipulation on this, and that we might have to get clarification from the owner as far as number of beds available on the property for a stipulation of number of guests or visitors at the property.
Let's, if we can first, maybe I'll ask Mr. Foster this question. Is that something that the city, the fire marshal or the building official could provide a number? What would be the maximum allowed based on bedrooms or square footage or something like that? I think that's probably, I know they, technically, there should be something in the code book that specifies that. Yeah, they gotta have, yeah. So I might say instead of the homeowner, providing a number, maybe we let the building official and fire marshal determine the maximum number per unit?
Chair Twait, conditional use permits, we do work with the fire marshal on inspections. What I would say is I'm not familiar enough with the fire code to note whether they have something that gives a maximum capacity of the structure. I'm not familiar with their code for a residential structure.
We just say it must meet.
It's
fire
based
code.
on rooms. So if you have a giant 20 by 20 cabin and you throw 100 bunks in there, 2 to a bunk, you're gonna have 200 capacity in a 20 by 20, but the fire code is gonna base it on a room.
We call that the U.S. Army. So like I said,
Accordance with fire code?
yeah, let's just do that, and then I think they can address it.
At least we have something in there that says you might limit it, so they can't have 100 people to one room.
Right. So,
And last, third motion, or I guess it'd be 11?
it'll be number 11, yeah.
Stipulation of the number of occupants will be limited to regulation of, meeting fire code regulation with the city, fire marshal?
Yep. Second? Somebody gonna second that? All right, seconded. Any discussion? Commissioner Halsted.
Just clarification on that, would that be just for an overnight type event, or if I have it's my birthday and I want to invite my family and friends over, is that going to be, well, no, that's a 2-bedroom thing and you've got 8 people here, you can't have a birthday party? I mean, that seems extremely limiting.
I think it's based on sleeping, and so overnights, and so there's.
So in an overnight capacity, I would like to kind of stipulate that in that motion.
So we're asking for a number of heads, a body, for overnight guests in a conditional use permit, but we have no mechanism right now to understand whether this person is overnighting or this person is participating in a partying event or some other barbecue. Registered guest.
I would just say go by fire marshal's code of registered guests for overnight. We just don't want to see 100 people bunking or 50 people bunking is what we're getting at. We're just trying to see a safe number to somehow limit the number of people that can stay at these cabins. I'm open to suggestions on verbiage.
I get what we're driving at. We're trying to drive at a maximum occupancy, but I really don't think that we're going to be able to grab at it. We're grabbing at straws. I think this is something more for code and for the council to address than for us in this conditional use permit. I think we're getting in the weeds here with trying to make a conditional use permit fit.
Well, I'm
We're
gonna
setting ordinances to be able to enforce them. We're starting to set a precedence on, we're trying to make these more enforceable, and we're trying to add the teeth. But if we don't add any teeth, then we don't have anything to enforce.
So
And so
I'm going to guess that when somebody inquires about staying there, they're going to list how many occupants are going to be there, and they're going to get charged accordingly, probably. So I think there will be a number, and I think there is a number that the fire marshal will be able to say is the right number for these cabins after he does an inspection. If we're missing the boat completely and the fire marshal says it's out of his jurisdiction, then we haven't got a number, and everything's fair game, I think, so.
So I guess I'll just go back to the original motion of meeting fire code appropriate for the size of dwelling.
And you wanted to just modify your motion to clarify that it's for registered guests overnight, is that
There you
right?
go.
And do we have
Yes, it will
consensus
include
of the
registered
second on
guests
that? Okay.
for overnight occupancy of the size of dwelling, meeting fire code. And what that comes to is what they'll be allowed to have on their overnight guests.
Okay. And Commissioner Woodard, you're good with the second on that? Okay. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Halsted?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard?
Yes.
Vice Chair Dothett?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Chair Twait?
Yes.
Commissioner Askin?
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes?
No.
Motion passes.
All right, Any other amendments we wish to make? If not, we will vote. Commissioner Fikes.
So how many complaints does an applicant have to receive before the permit is revoked?
I'm going to guess that that's going to be an administrative or a council directive that isn't going to be tied to this permit specifically. Would that be accurate?
Through the chair, Commissioner Fikes, there's no set number. Like I said, if there are notified, investigated and verified code violations, then that's the opportunity to get them resolved by the property owner and the permit holder. So there's no set number. But like I said, if that at that point, if no remedy can be determined, then a possible next step is to come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider revocation.
So would it be appropriate for us to say after 2 letters of violations to do it, or is it out of our purview completely to set that?
Chair Twait, that's a good question. I will say, and I'm going off of not having the code in front of me. The code, the way it's written, is to provide a reasonable amount of time for a permit holder to respond and to remedy it. I will say that's also kind of from my perspective on the code enforcement what I'm driving for as well. It is code compliance, not to be overly rash or quick to try and revoke a permit. And in saying that, it really does come down to conditional use permits are, as we know, oftentimes utilized for a small business in residential focused zoning districts, and to very rapidly, quickly to move towards revocation could really impact a small business owner. So like I said, my focus is on the code compliance, but once we provide that notification, it needs to have some sort of resolution. I'll just say from my perspective, it's not going to just, if we don't get a response, as noted here, there's 2 letters, provided in trying to get that compliance. Either the compliance is made and accepted, or that next potential level is for Planning and Zoning Commission to consider revocation.
So I have a follow-up, I guess, back to the second notice dated January 17th, 2022. How long after you sent that were you in contact with the property owner? How long did that take?
Chair Twait, I want to say, I'm not sure. I'd have to check an exact date, but I'd say perhaps March time period. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. So we have the main motion as amended before us. Is there any other discussion or proposed amendments? Seeing none, we'll please call the roll.
Commissioner Woodard?
No.
Vice Chair Dothett?
Yes.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes.
Chair Twait?
No.
Commissioner Askin?
No.
Commissioner Fikes?
No.
Commissioner Halstead?
No.
Motion fails.
All right, and there is a 15-day appeal period that an affected party can file with the clerk's office. And that will move us on, finally, to F2, Resolution PZ 2022-09, which is an application for a conditional use permit for a guide service for the property described as Lot 3, Angler Acre Subdivision Part 4, located at 1025 Angler Drive, Kenai. Application submitted by Thomas Hessing, 1865 Frederickson Street, Fremont, Nebraska. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Halstead.
I move we approve Resolution PZ 202209, application for conditional use permit for a guide service for the property at Angler Drive.
And a second.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. We've had a staff report already, so at this point, we can let the applicant speak to PZ 2022-09.
I guess I don't have a whole lot to add to that situation. I just, I guess I'd like my application to stand on its own, you know, up or down vote there. I just want to be treated like everybody else. And I feel like I've filled out the application as presented. And, you know, I don't think it's fair to vote based on somebody else's performance in the future. That just doesn't make any sense to me. I'm not sure what good a guide's license is going to do me without any lodging to go along with it.
All right, thank you. We will open it up for public testimony. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to PZ 2022-09? That brave guy again.
Once again, my name is Jerry Huff. And so one of the comments I have here on this particular permit here is that Mr. Hosing states that he will not have lodging at this time, and he also does not have a dock. So there's really nowhere for a guide to park their boats. I guess they could pick people up from there, but I don't believe he's set up to do any guiding. He's not a registered guide, so I'm not sure what his plan is, his business plan is there. But once again, if he's going to be guided, to be somebody else guiding out of there, and we don't know who the guide is, and we don't know how they act, and we don't know how they interact with the neighborhood. So, and so part of this, I'd like to kind of go back a little bit. I'm not so concerned with the foster business and the violations. To me, all that's just a bunch of smoke. And the amount of people you have in your cabins, and the amount of people, you know, how late you're out at night, and all this kind of stuff. To me, it's the whole it's the whole experience of living on the creek, and what we started with and where we are now. And that is all diminished, like Commissioner Twait mentioned. Our comprehensive plan stipulates quality of life for property owners, and that means residential property owners as well as potential property owners that want to run businesses within a residential neighborhood. And let's not lose sight of this, that this is a residential neighborhood. This is not a recreational, guiding, cabin rental, whatever anybody wants to call it. This is a residential neighborhood with a lot of people that are residents that live there, and they're highly inconvenienced by this sort of activity. And like we've talked about before, a lot of the guys that are working there, that have been there in a long time, are pretty respectful. This latest group of people, not so much. So what we've got here, we go back to the Foster permit. That permit was issued to Gary and Kathleen Foster back in 1988, I believe it was, for 3 cabins and I think 2 boats. And it's morphed into 5 cabins, 6 boats, and there's multiple properties all up and down the creek now that have done the very same thing. They were permitted for one type of activity, and they've morphed into this huge, huge operation where they have 6, 8 boats, 6 guides working out of them. They're in and out, in and out. It's a highly high traffic, high volume sort of business now. And so it's not a quiet business. It never has been a quiet business, but it's been tolerated because the the type of fishing activity was limited. And with the sockeye fishery, it's unlimited. It's wide open. People are running in and out, more bag limits than they're supposed to. I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm not going to get into that. But I just want everybody to focus on that this is a residential neighborhood, and it just doesn't affect Foster's or Foster's Landing or Angler Acres. It encompasses my property and several, and then also Dawchuck Subdivision. Beaver Creek is a long creek, and there's a lot of people that live there, and for the most part, they're all long-time residents. I've been there 30-some years, most people have, but these people are all people that live there and raise their families there, and they live here year-round. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Commissioner Fikes?
Is there a certain time that the guides have to be on and off the river?
Not with red fishing, no. Not with sockeye fishing. King salmon fishing has regulations, and it's 6 to 6, I believe it is.
Okay.
And they're only allowed to fish 5 days a week. The
And
sockeye salmon's wide open.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Anyone else?
Greg Anderson, 1110 Angler Drive. How do you run a guide service if you have no dock? And I'm pretty sure that there's a process for all of that where Parks has to come in and approve all of that. And I haven't seen any of that type of activity there. And so I don't see how that is that there should be some sort of issuance of a permit for something that basically can't exist. So.
Any questions?
Would that be a question for the property owner?
It probably would, and we'll let him address it later. My guess is it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that you can run your business out of there and run the boats down and launch them from somewhere else. I would assume that's what the plan is at some point, as opposed to putting in a dock there. But we can find out the answer to that, I'm sure. So, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Anyone else?
Well,
Oh.
Lincoln Three's the charm again. I'm Mac Padgett, 855 Ames, speaking for the neighborhood of Beaver Creek. The carrying capacity for Beaver Creek is way beyond its limit. I understand that Mr. Hosing shouldn't have to bear the brunt of that, but as the Planning and Zoning Commission, I encourage y'all to look at what's happening on Beaver Creek. Unfortunately, we're here tonight to try to stem the tide of the problem. So unfortunately, that's where we're here from Mr. Hosing's standpoint, but think about the carrying capacity of Beaver Creek. Think about the nature of its riparian habitat. It is impacting the health of the Kenai River. Beaver Creek is one of the nurseries. So one more is not going to help the situation. Thank you.
Commissioner Fikes?
Is there any habitat restoration or any communication with the neighborhood and the river center, or is there any kind of?
You have to, as a property owner, you have to go before the River Center to do anything dock related. And speaking of docks, I would encourage y'all, when you do look at these permits for guide operations, to put some limit on how many can be there. And boats, same thing. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was looking towards bank degradation or breakdown of the banks, if there's any kind of protections put in place or whatever. That's why I didn't know if there's communication with the River
I
Center.
strongly encourage you during the latter part of July to come take a look at Beaver Creek. Call me, I'll be glad to take you. We live right on the creek. We're there every day. We watch what goes on. We don't have any financial tie to what's happening. We live here. And
So-
the burden of proof there is attached.
So there is bank erosion, but there's nobody actively.
It's neglect for the riparian habitat. You see people pulling their boats up in the grass, people that don't have docks. That when you walk on that, it's not good.
Sure. Okay. And that's not something that Fish and Game or
Parks
Park
should be
Service?
all over it.
Okay, but they're not in that?
They don't pay any attention. They're busy.
Okay.
We've brought these issues up with them before.
With who?
Parks?
Parks? Yeah, I mean, I would think the fish and wildlife biologists should be the ones that really get after that, for sure.
You know, they struggle with enforcement like other agencies.
For sure. Yeah. Commissioner Askin.
Do you know if the Corps of Engineers or that Charisma group has anything to do with it
You know,
also?
I think they've kind of let the River Center take over all that. I mean, they're part of what happens with the River Center. But as Mr. Huff says, it's gone. So, you know, my permit is my house, one dock, and it doesn't mention how many boats I can have, but the dock can only be 16 feet by 4 feet, 80 square feet. That's a standard footprint dock. You can apply and get larger ones, but you have people that have far exceeded that. And I would guess, I don't know this for a fact, I guess they have not gone through the permitting process.
I could shed a little light on those criteria for a dock.
I might let you come back up, but that way there we can get you on the record, but not right this minute. So, in your best estimation, how many boats are putting pressure on Beaver Creek right now? How many boats are using that in July, say? And more, not so much the personal use, but on the guide service and more of a commercial application.
I will ask for help from the audience. I know there are certainly 3 mega operators that have more than 4.
I'd say between 30 and 40.
30 of commercial.
So somewhere between 30 and 40 independent or individual stickered guide boats. As you've heard, there are also some other people that don't necessarily follow those rules, but there are quite a few, more than enough.
And this dock area, this is in front of each one of your homes on the
Correct.
bank, or, okay.
It's a problem for another day.
Excellent question.
Thank you. Oh, did you have something?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're not done yet.
The Kenai, well, yeah, just because it comes down to the, and it might be more clarification for some of the chair. That all falls under the Kenai River Special Management Area, and State Parks does the enforcement for that, for the River Center, and they are the ones that would also be in charge of permitting for each one of those individual docks. And I would be really surprised if there isn't some kind of a permitting process that has to be followed, even for the larger docks, as tight as they are on the rest of the river. And I know I talked to with the 105, I did look into calling State Parks and express some of the concerns that were brought up in this meeting. I talked to the manager, or the main enforcement officer for the area, and there is ongoing investigations, and they do have some open cases. But he didn't bring anything up about dock size, but I'm sure we could call and ask, and they would be more than willing to go about that. They watch the Kenai River pretty tight when it comes to docks. I'm not exactly sure on Beaver Creek, but I know there's that information. You can find it. It's out there. And I do see like you said, the grass being, mostly like drift boats being pulled up and down, and kind of drives me nuts on there too. It is a lot of tidal effect area, so it's not a lot of until you get up higher on the creek, you don't see like the coconut reeds and that kind of a bank erosion, but it's more marshy tidal area in that general area. So it's a little bit different than what you're thinking of, probably more of the upper river where bank erosion from wakes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. It's a little bit different area.
But it clearly, I think I've actually got some pictures where you've got a guide operation that has an existing dock that is with 4 or 6 boats on it, but how many ever it's reached its carrying capacity, and they just, off the end of the dock, they walk through the grass, throw out an anchor, and anchor their boat there. So I'll definitely get photos this summer. So that's the kind of activity that we see. So people, Commissioner Dothan, might be doing exactly what they say, but there's always that other piece, because we're busy.
Thank you.
I'm Jim Richardson, 1015 Angler Drive. I can answer part of that discussion. I was the president of the Kenai River Special Management Area Board when we developed got the limitations and the design. And it's supposed to be, as he said, limited to 80 square feet. There's lots and lots of illegal guys. There, at the time, unless something's changed, we stipulated that there's one dock per property and all docks are the same. It doesn't make any difference if you're a commercial operator, they're all the same size. And it's possible that in the intervening years that has been changed, but I'm not aware that it has. But even as president, I pointed out the areas on Beaver Creek that had violations, and I couldn't get enforcement down there. They're like everybody else, like Fish and Game, like DEC, and like City of Kenai Police. Enforcement is a big deal. You had a discussion about what happens to police calls. I can tell you, not a damn thing. They are embarrassed when they come out because they say they would love to do something, but they can't do anything. When we phone in a complaint for next door, it's a joke. They laugh because they know nothing's going to happen. And that pretty well diminishes the incentive to phone every time you have a problem because nothing happens. I phoned in noise complaints. I phoned in trespassing complaints. I had to destroy my fence 3 times. The police came out, but the effect is that nothing happens. And you keep asking for everybody to prove stuff. We've got the city manager out, and he's observed stuff. He's seen it with his own eyes. We had police people come out and develop special process, and they see it with their own eyes. And they don't pass that information along to you. That was one of the points that I had, is that it would be good if that better communication would be nice so that you don't feel like you're blindsided and we don't feel like you're not paying any attention to us. And the last thing is that I did have one point on this. I would oppose the guide. I agree with the gentleman before me, but what I said on this is that due to past problems of operation at this location, and that's the last 2 years, and those were problems, I recommend that the guide operations not be allowed at this time if after a period of operation of the business is operated in a reasonable manner, perhaps expansion of the CUP would be considered. But you should think about that in terms of overall effect. You're not going to do it, which we really, really appreciate. But if there were going to be people staying there, then every guide that comes in, it brings maybe 4 cars and 2 cars or whatever. There's just a lot of traffic associated with that. And again, you didn't say, it was just said, the permit said cabins and guides. It didn't say 1 cabin, 2 cabins, 3 cabins, or you're going to raise the whole thing and put in 20 cabins. Cabins sprung up out of nowhere next door with other buildings and support buildings, and they multiply. So you need to be specific, please.
Thank you. Any questions? Vice Chair Dothett.
And I appreciate that. And that's where, by adding stipulations and getting more stipulation, I think that's one of the big things that have faulted on a lot of these previous conditional use permits is the lack of specific stipulations and what we want to see: maximum number of cabins, maximum noise, noise hours, having that meat and potatoes in these and not just being so generic is one of the things we're working for to try to change ongoing and going forward with a lot of these conditional use permits. So we have some teeth to go by. And I hear that over and over, and that's what we're hoping to try to get better is increase the stipulations on these and make them more specific so when we do see violations, they have something to cite them for without just having to say, well, it was okay because it was kind of a gray area. But if there's black and white, there's something to cite for. Thank you.
That would be a real help for us because we don't know, the police don't know. There's a stipulation, you're supposed to be quiet at 10 o'clock. But what does that mean? If you have 10, 20, or 30 drunk people next door singing and yelling and amplified music and beating on a bongo drum and hollering and running around, that's pretty annoying at any time, not just after 10 o'clock. And the wording of I believe your rules for the police is that a noise that are inappropriate at any time is not okay. But then you're asking the police to come in and say, evaluate, and as soon as they see a police car come in, everything quiets down in there. Well, we didn't see anything, they were quiet when we were there. And so, you have the police have a very difficult, they try, and they're embarrassed when they come out. I need to try and help them, and you guys need to try and help them.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right.
Thank you.
Okay. We are going to take a quick break. Give me about 2 or 3 minutes here. We're going to take a quick All right, we are back on the record, and we were taking testimony still, so anyone from the public wishing to testify. Yep, please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
MJ Loveland, 945 Ames, 1003 Angler. And I just wanted a point of clarification. The part of Beaver Creek that we're talking about right now is actually the Kenai River. It's in the Kenai River Special Management. It's actually part of the Kenai River. And in my opinion, it's at its capacity for numbers of boats. There's a lot of bank degradement. There's a lot of fish waste and trash that goes in the river. In July, it's kind of a stinky mess. And it's nothing personal. I would oppose any more guide pressure or any more boat pressure in that area just based on the number of boats in the creek in the summertime.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, thank you. Anyone else in the audience here, or let's go look online.
If there is anyone that wants to testify on Zoom, you can unmute at this time.
Okay. All right, well then we will close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Any discussion? Commissioner Halstead.
Is our applicant still online?
I don't think so. It's 12:30 in the a.m. in Nebraska.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering, since there is a 30-day appeal period on this, would it behoove us to postpone this for 30 days? That way, if it does get appealed and approved, then this becomes more of a pertinent thing. Otherwise, he'd have to reapply, because I think as it sits right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But if it happens to be appealed, overruled, or overturned, then this becomes more of an actual issue? Or is it, we've heard everything that we need to hear type situation? I think
I'll defer that to the clerk's office. So it's a 15-day appeal period, and then council wouldn't see it for 30 days, maybe, in addition to that, and then they have 30 days to make a decision? Or how long does that work?
Yeah, it's a 15-day appeal period, so the appeal period closes on the 28th, and I think your guys' next meeting is the 27th. So you're wanting to postpone it until after?
We would postpone it to give them enough time to, if they were to appeal it,
Let that process play out.
An actual, rather than having to reapply and do all that.
I think, I kind of see where, the applicant himself said, I would be surprised if he doesn't just, I wish he was still on there, he might pull this petition based on what his previous comment was, that it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to have a guide business who doesn't have cabins. So I would think if that one didn't get approved, then this one is nullified. And it might behoove us maybe at least till next meeting to clarify that with the applicant if he's not here now. If he wants to continue with the process of even applying for this one, in stipulation that his other one didn't get approved.
So I would say, if we want to go down that road, we can postpone it to our next meeting, get clarification, and then if he would still want to do it, we'd have a little more idea of a date certain of when the appeal would be run its course, I guess, and go that route. I would say if we want to go that, we could at least postpone it to the next meeting, and then we can address it again then if we want to. But
I will say, sorry to interrupt, but if this one were not to get passed, then it would be on the same appeal process. See what I'm saying? If this one were not to pass, then he would be appealing both of them at the same time, and that would be, I don't know, if we might ask our city clerk if that would.
They would probably rather have it all dealt with on one night.
Last year.
Yeah.
Because they are separate resolutions, I think it would be two separate Board of Adjustment decisions. So they could deal with it on one night if they wanted to have a long meeting.
They could do it the same night. They could address both of them, yeah.
So will we be doing more harm than good?
What's that?
Would we be doing more harm than good? I mean, I'm thinking I'm saving them the paperwork and the filing side of it, just so that it, okay, now that would have the potential of moving forward, but if it
Again,
would
maybe
cause.
through to Mr. Foster or to the clerk's office, but they would, if we postpone to the next meeting, if we've closed the public hearing, would we have to advertise again or not? Would we have to go through that process? It's a public hearing decision. Mr. Foster.
Chair Twait, so the appeal period actually expires after the next meeting.
So we'd have to do 2 meetings from now then if we wanted to let that logic work. Let's just keep going with it.
I would say
I
keep
think.
it on the same timeline. I think
Yep.
it might be better just to
Yep.
keep it on the same timeline, pass or fail right now. At least they're both in the same timeline.
Okay, so we have it before us for discussion.
I guess.
Vice Chair Dothett.
My comments on this is as per the applicant. If he doesn't have cabins, he doesn't see that he has a purpose for the guide. So if he's saying he doesn't have a purpose since he doesn't have cabins, I don't see why we would approve something that he doesn't feel he needs. So that's where I'm at on that one, unless he were to change his mind later date. But I believe the testimony was he didn't feel that it made much sense, even as the applicant, to have a guide service without cabins. So that's where I'm at on this, is agreeing with what his wishes would be, that he doesn't have a guide service if he doesn't have cabins. So I would be saying no on this.
I have a question for Mr. Foster. In working with the applicant, did he indicate that he was going to try to put a dock in and launch from there, or did he have an idea of how that was going to work?
Chair Twit, I don't recall in the application a discussion about a dock.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion?
I would just agree that, he kind of stated briefly that without the first one, he didn't really have a need for the second one, and then he is not here to really say anything else, so I understand it's late in his time, but he also needs to be here to present.
All right. Vice Chair Dothett.
I make a motion to, we go towards vote? I think we're done.
Yeah, well, if we're done, everybody's done discussing. Okay. I guess, I'll just go on the record, I guess, and state that, again, I think that he could certainly run a guide business from that property and pull his boats down the road and launch them anywhere that was possible. But I believe, again, from the testimony he stated, I don't know that it's his wishes, and so I will be voting against it at that, because of that. So, and if no one else has anything to comment on, we will go to the vote, please.
And as we vote, if each commissioner could just make a brief statement about just justifying their vote, yes or no?
Yep.
Vice Chair Dothett.
I'll be voting no, based on the testimony of the applicant saying that without his cabins, he didn't see the need for having a guide service. I do agree with Chair Twait's comments that he feasibly could run a business out of there without a dock, as in, you could always go upriver or something, but as his wishes would go, I'm going to go agree with the applicant on this, that he's without cabins, he doesn't feel it necessary, so I will be no.
Commissioner Greenberg?
I believe that I'm going to vote independent of the other decision. I think he could full well run a guide service out of this place. There's several guide services there, and I'll be voting yes.
All right, Chair Tweed?
I think as I stated, I will be a no.
Okay, Commissioner Oskin?
I also will be a no, partly based on applicant statements and also concern for the condition of Beaver Creek.
Commissioner Fikes?
Yes, I'll be voting against it. I would have greatly liked to heard some additional testimony as to the applicant's plan for the guide service, so absence his testimony, and then basing it on his earlier testimony with the other conditional use permit. I don't see where the neighborhood is going to be benefited from this type of business, so I'll be voting no.
Commissioner Halsted?
Yes, I vote no, based on the applicant's testimony and that he's not here to provide additional information. I do think it's feasible for a guide to run a business without a dock. He can definitely move his boat down the road. Many guides do that, so.
Commissioner Woodard?
I too am no for the same reasons, as he stated, that it wasn't useful having it without the rooms. And I don't see how he's going to bring boats into that area without damaging the wildlife or whatever there.
Okay, motion fails.
Okay, and again, a 15-day appeal period that an affected party can file with the clerk's office. I would thank everybody for their testimony, and now you just got to stay for the rest of the meeting like the rest of us. No, you don't have to. You can go if you like. All right, we'll move on to item G, unfinished business. We have none. Item H, new business. 2 items before us tonight. H1 for action approval is a special use permit to Weaver Brothers Incorporated for truck trailer storage. Can I get a motion, please? Commissioner Askin.
I move that we approve this special use permit to Weaver Brothers for truck trailer storage.
Second. Commissioner Halsted seconded. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait and fellow commissioners. Staff's presentation is on a special use permit to Weaver Brothers Incorporated for truck trailer storage. This is the same special use permit application that came before the commission last summer. The request this year is for the same 5 parcels for the special use permit, and you can see these parcels on page 45 and 46 of the staff report. And these are adjacent to existing leases that Weaver Brothers has of city property for truck trailer storage. The reasoning for the special use permit is to allow from some expansion of their business beyond what their leases provide adjacent to the special use permit request. The question in front of the commission is, does the commission recommend council approve the special use permit? And that would be for 1 year, from June 21, 2022 to June 20th, 2023. Concludes my presentation. Happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion? Vice Chair Dothett.
To the staff, are these are the same current lots they've been using for the previous year, right behind the steam cleaners by the soccer, the same ones they already have the trailers on, correct?
Through the chair, Vice Chair, that is correct.
And is there a stipulation, and I think I remember hearing something about, for only the 1 year on this, that we can only do 1 year at a time?
Through the chair, Vice Chair, that is correct. Special use permits are a maximum of 12 months.
Commissioner Fikes.
Commissioner
Fikes.
Is this going to impact any other users of the area, the ball fields or anything?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Fikes, I don't believe the utilization of these 5 parcels or portions of parcels would impact other uses there. And I certainly haven't heard of any since the special use permit that was granted last summer.
So it doesn't impact any kind of parking, special events in the area? Traffic is at a late hour of the evening or midday, or?
Through the chair, Commissioner Fikes. Yeah, I haven't heard anything regarding any issues with parking or conflicts with other uses in the vicinity.
Just response to that, they also have the yard directly across the street.
Yeah, no, I was just curious
Yeah.
if it impacted anybody. I know there's various events.
Yeah,
and
as
stuff,
far as
so-
traffic goes, I don't know that it's added a huge amount. They just
I haven't
more
heard
stir.
anything, so
Yeah,
I was
I
just
haven't heard anything
curious.
problems, and it's kind of a commercial area, so I haven't heard any or had any complaints about that.
I just knew
There
there's
is quite a bit of
there's
parking still.
skateboard park, so I just was wondering about
Yeah,
traffic.
that's
and
over
kids.
here.
Okay.
So there's a gap between these two. There is a gap between the skateboard park where their trailers stop. There's this parking area between there and the skateboard park. It's not being utilized by this permit.
Commissioner Halsted.
Yeah, I think that's great, and they've been using it for a couple of years now, as far as I'm aware of. They've done a great job, and I think are very clean and respectful of the area. Is there a potential that, like, those lots would be for sale, that they'd want to buy them rather than try and lease them every year?
Mr. Foster.
Through the chair, Commissioner Halsted. These are city-owned properties within the airport reserve. I would want to double check to ensure that each of these properties wouldn't be available, but generally that is the case, that city-owned properties within the airport reserve wouldn't be available for sale.
Anyone else? Commissioner Fikes.
Sounds like a good revenue stream, and it sounds like a good stewardship of the lease, so I'll be in favor of it.
Very good. All right, seeing none, please call the roll.
Commissioner Greenberg,
Yes.
Chair Twait,
Yes.
Commissioner Askin,
Yes.
Commissioner Fikes,
Yes.
Commissioner Halsted,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Doffett.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, item H2 for action approval, resolution number 2022-XX, to be determined, I assume, approving the execution of a lease to Joel Caldwell. Motion, please. Commissioner Askin.
I move that we approve the resolution 2022-XX, recommending that council approve execution of a lease to Joel Caldwell.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Oh,
Just for clarification, you're not approving the resolution, it's a council resolution, so
Oh.
you're recommending that council approve it? Okay, all right.
Do you want me to reword it?
we got it. Okay, do we have a second? Oh, okay, seconded. Staff report.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Staff's presentation is on a application from Joel Caldwell and you can see on page 58 of the staff report, this is 170 Granite Point Court. Currently, Joel Caldwell entered into a lease assignment for this property with Dwayne Benton, and that was June 19th, 2020. This lease terminates on June 30th, 2022. Mr. Caldwell proposed improvements with the application for a lease, and those improvements include additional storage, restroom facilities, and paving, with an estimated $100,000 value of improvements to be completed within 2 years of signing the lease. And the activities noted on the application is aircraft storage and maintenance. The requested lease term is 17 years. Pursuant to KMC 211060, lease application review, notice of lease application was posted in the Peninsula Clarion and stated competing applications may be submitted for the parcel within 30 days to the city. The 30-day window from publication ends on April 16th, 2022, and to date, no competing applications have been submitted to the city. So I did want to note that, today being April 13th, that window hasn't closed. If there was an competing application submitted, then this would, consideration could come back before the commission. If not, by the April 16th, then that would be noted and moved on to council for their consideration. The parcel is within the airport light industrial zone. The purpose of the zone is to protect the viability of the Kenai Municipal Airport as a significant resource to the community by encouraging compatible land uses and reducing hazards that may endanger lives and property of the public and aviation users. The proposed aeronautical use is a permitted use in the airport and light industrial zone. The proposed use complies with Imagine Kenai 2030 comprehensive plan by supporting development on lease lots with development that is in alignment with the Kenai Municipal Airport's marketing strategy. And the Airport Commission will be reviewing this lease application and providing a recommendation during their meeting tomorrow night, April 14th, 2022. So the question before the Commission is, does the Commission recommend Council approve the execution of a lease to Joel Caldwell? That concludes my presentation. Happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you. Any discussion, questions of staff? Come on, nothing? All right. All right, seeing none, will please call the roll.
And I apologize, I missed who seconded the original motion.
Commissioner
Thank
Woodard.
Yes.
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 All right, thank you. Under item I, pending items, we have none. Item J, reports. J1, City Council. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Council met last Wednesday. I know we've had a long night, so I will try to get through this a little fast. We had a scheduled public comment from Mr. Dolifka from the Boys and Girls Club on the plans that they have for the Boys and Girls Club. They ultimately gave a presentation to the body and asked for a land donation that they were hoping somebody from the body would pick up a ordinance for their land donation. And if you aren't familiar, they had asked they're looking at purchasing the youth care facility that's on the way down towards the beach on the right-hand side. It's going to be closing. Guessing they're going to be combining over towards their kids over towards Marathon Road. But they will be closing that facility down, and it'll be for sale, and the Boys and Girls Club is looking at purchasing that. Their problem is there's not adequate parking for them, so they had two proposals that they brought forth. The first one was taking the baseball fields that are there. At the far end of the baseball field, there's a women's field with a lit up sign, and they wanted that the fields to be moved to a different area so that property could be developed as a parking lot. That wasn't really a viable option for some people to kick another entity that's been operating for 40 plus years out of their grounds. So their other proposal to the body was there is some wooded property that butts right up next to that care center. So if you're going down towards the beach, there's a wooded lot right on your right-hand side. It's about 4 acres, and that is what they would like donated to them. So that will be coming forth in front of council here soon, and I suggest get more knowledgeable on that property, and you can find that specific property in our land use plan. Yeah. The next one we had was ordinance number 3274, which increased the estimated revenues and appropriations in the general funds, Parks and Recs and Beautification Department. It authorized an increase to the multipurpose facility management service for the additional ice maintenance services that they had seen from the previous year. The next one that was passed was ordinance 3275, which was amending the Kenai Municipal Code Chapter 2305 in the general provisions to add a new category of temporary employees titled program or project employees. What this does is it changes where basically these temporary positions after 6 months would have to roll over to some sort a part-time, full-time position, which would put them in the PERS program. So by amending this, we were able to avoid those positions going under the PERS, which, is a good benefit to the city. The next ordinance was 3276. We both introduced this, had a second reading, and had a motion to adopt it. 3276 was accepting and appropriating a grant under the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, passed through the Alaska Community Foundation. This allocated $100,000 to our senior center. And they'll be able to use those. And the reason why we did this all in one meeting was the grant that they had got expires at the end of June, and they were worried that they would not be able to utilize that $100,000 in time of the expiration. And that will go to fixing some cooler and refrigeration unit repairs in their walk-in refrigeration units, as well as providing PPEs and emergency kits for seniors, as well as food needs. The next one that we passed was Resolution 2022-20, which was authorizing the city manager to enter into an airline operating agreement and terminal air lease with Kenai Aviation, as you guys have just heard across your body as well. So we do look forward to the expansion of having Kenai Aviation. If you didn't look at their website recently, they have acquired another new airplane that they'll be bringing on their fleet, and then they will be offering a 4 a.m. flight from Anchorage to Kenai, and then an evening flight from Kenai back to Anchorage. And they're servicing many other areas from Kodiak to Homer to, I think, like Dillingham. So they're servicing a lot of additional areas as well. Resolution number 2022-2021 was approving a sole source purchase through Motorola Solutions for 2-phase radio upgrades to the Kenai Dispatch Center. As you guys know, we've kind of had a big project with replacing all of our radio systems within dispatch and police, and we're kind of getting at the tail end of these projects. They've been able to offset quite a bit of this with grant funds and not just our general fund dollars. The other one was passed was Resolution 2022-22, which was authorizing a budget transfer in the general fund for the police department's anticipated fuel cost increase for the remainder of FY22. As you guys know, when we put budgets, we didn't expect to see the huge increase in gas prices at the pumps. We did question just kind of how the fleet cards work, and are we getting fuel at the Chevron, or are we getting at the Crawley to Soro? And it was identified that we do have fleet cards for the Crawley to Soro, and we get a little bit of a fuel discount as well. So that's about all I have. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday. We do at the end of April have our employee evaluations for our city manager, our city attorney, and our city clerk. And then on May, and I don't know if Mr. Foster is going to be speaking to this, but we will be doing another waterfront community part of our waterfront study, feasibility study, on Monday, May 2nd and Tuesday, May 3rd. And I hope to see you guys there as part of the process. The Monday, May 2nd is in the evening, and I am sorry I don't have the time on my calendar. And then the Tuesday, the 3rd, is kind of a drop-in from the morning, and then they'll give results at like 7 o'clock at night. So you can kind of drop in, see what the presentation of all the previous comments were submitted, and kind of help narrow the projected path forward going down. So that's all I have for you guys. I'm happy to answer any questions.
On that May 2nd meeting, is that going to be at the Visitor Center again?
Yes.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much. J2 Borough Planning, Commissioner Fikes.
Yes, we met back on Monday of this week, and we had the Beachcomber Anchor Point property remand before us, and that was voted down. And then we had 9 plats that we approved, 8 that we approved, 1 that we postponed.
Any questions? All right, I have one for you, but maybe afterwards. Regarding a variance that you guys, I guess, approved and then Assembly rejected it on a piece of, anyway, I'll talk to you about that. I'm curious. We will move on, though, to item J3, Administration. Mr. Foster.
Thank you, Chair Twait. Just a couple items of note. For the next meeting on April 27th, we do have a conditional use permit application. I was also going to plug the waterfront study on, well, I will say all this information is on the city website for both May 2nd at the Visitor Center evening meeting, and that's going to be the consultant providing the visioning results from a couple months ago. And then May 3rd is also at the Visitor Center all day, and then the evening meeting that's a report out about the day's events on May 3rd. And so I'll plug it again at the next meeting, and then if anybody wants more information sooner than that, it's right on our website. That's all I got.
Guys are good at this when it gets late, huh? Any questions for Mr. Foster? All right, additional public comment? See nobody anywhere, so we can move on to informational items. We have one is the Kenai Dog Park, and I don't know if anyone needs any explanation, but either, I believe, Councilmember Winger probably knows a little bit about it, or Mr. Foster, if we want to talk about it. If not, read it at your leisure. And when they get ready to go work out there, volunteer to go work out there. Yeah, absolutely.
There will be a resolution coming forward to council to appropriate a little bit more land to the dog park and the Dobbin spec. So when they did a conceptual drawing with the Parks and Recs department and started their planning, when they got out and started putting the fence post in, they realized their conceptual plan and the size of the footprint was very much off. So they're asking for 0.53 acres more to round it out at almost a 1.5 acre dog park, which goes with kind of the standard for having a large and a small dog park. For safety reasons, they have to have a little bigger front footprint. So you will see some land donation just to kind of fix it.
Thank you. Next meeting, April 27th, 2 weeks from tonight. Commissioners' comments and questions. Commissioner Woodard.
I have none.
Commissioner Askin.
Good meeting tonight. I don't have anything else.
Commissioner Halstead.
Oh, I've got something to say.
Do it.
So one of the bigger issues that I think came out of this meeting would be, and I hope I didn't speak too ill of Mr. Foster and his company, because I think they do a great job. Enforcement is always an issue no matter what. I mean, you don't have enough people to cover the amount of area, so it's in no way a reflection of him or his team. I think he does a fantastic job. But the other part of that was I'd love to have more of a template type something that we could do as far as the guides in particular, because I know that is a really hot topic, and I think when we discussed adding some of the criteria on there, that if we, I don't know if that's something that we necessarily needed to do a work session on, but if we could kind of boilerplate what we'd like to see. I think the hours was something that we added recently, and that definitely looked good. I think that was nice to have it on there. But on the guides, if we had more of a specific thing that we were looking for as a group here, that it would help make that decision-making process a little bit more, and especially for the applicant to know what we're looking at. I know it would definitely help with the neighbors, and when they're talking about, enforcement and issues that come up, if we're like, well, these are the very specific things that we're looking for. I would love to be able to do that. And again, I don't know quite how to present that other than in a work session, but I don't know if that is necessarily a work session item. That is all. Halt that out.
Turn your microphone off then. Commissioner Greenberg.
Yeah, I think we have I think we're seeing sort of an underlying problem where people have sort of lost confidence in some of the process. And the question is, how do we build back that confidence? How do we make it so that we can look at these permits in a way that's different? And so we fix the underlying problem, because I don't think that that's the neighborhood's going to it's going to improve at this point. I think the problem's still going to be there. So how do we really fix the problem and build back that confidence? And that's a question that I have, so that people can look at a permit and just, evaluate it on its own merit.
Commissioner Fikes.
Yes, I think a work session or some kind of a discussion would be beneficial. I agree with wanting to put conditions as a means of a mechanism of a tool to do enforcement, but to try and hash it out here, as you see, it kind of stretches it into the night. But then I also worry, what about those that are going to come down the road and fill out an application, or those that last month filled out an application? We said yes to them with no conditions, and now we said no to him, but yes with these conditions, and so it's subjective. So I get nervous when we get up here and we're trying to, have a discussion about how to put conditions, and you may or may not agree with it, but then I worry, is that fair to the next applicant or the previous applicant? So that's where I think the work session and not having to step out in adjudicative session, but to have time to sit and discuss that.
Good comments, I believe. Vice Chair Dothett. Use it now, somehow.
I agree. I think we really need to get to the root of the problem, and I think we do need to have a work session. It could just be like we did with the land use plan, maybe have just an hour before a meeting to sit down and hash out what key points we want to see possibly change as a commission for enforcement issues. I really think the root cause of a lot of these issues is the non-understanding of enforcement issues and what we can really do and how we can improve that. Do we need to write stuff in that might change it and put in black and white that you get so many complaints via the police department, then it spurs this? Do we need to make it more black and white, and as a commission decide to forward on suggestions to city council to make these changes in the future to make everything more black and white, have more teeth behind it, so we get the trust of these people back? Because in tonight's thing, most of them weren't against the actual permit. They were against the lack of enforcement, that if this permit gets approved, they don't feel that we can enforce it. They weren't against the applicant's permit. They were against the lack of our policies on how we can enforce it. And I think the applicant suffered because of that. And I think that's something that as a body we need to address and put more of this, of what we want to see and how we can make it more enforceable and more black and white. And if we want to see, do we have the authority to have fines or set certain parameters behind these to make it better? I think it's something we need to address, and I think we should have I really do encourage us to have a work session and put everybody's ideas on paper and maybe submit it to a council member that might want to write it down and make an official change kind of thing. And that's it.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, as your guys' liaison, I'll definitely carry these concerns and these comments over to the body, and I would be in support of you guys doing a work session, and I would encourage our city attorney, and our body can appoint him to come as well, but I know our city attorney would be more than willing to come sit in just to make sure any concerns are within that legal scope, because ultimately any code enforcements or anything that's issued he's gonna defend them on the city's behalf. So I would be happy to help facilitate our city attorney helping you guys with it. And then this has been one of my concerns, and I've actually addressed noise complaint to our city attorney on what we could do as far as an ordinance, and you wouldn't believe the amount of hoops that there are as far as trying to just establish a basic noise ordinance, which is why there's never been one really brought forth. But if we could do something that turned out a good working product that we could maybe amend the current code, I would be happy to work with you guys and co-sponsor that over. So I think we could really work on this, and I think you guys have the same concerns I have on code enforcement and the more outline, because you guys are trying to navigate something with not really clear direction. And I think a lot of the questions could have been maybe answered. We have the ability to have our lawyer up on the dais with us to answer questions, which you guys do not. And I think there may be some benefit to maybe having some legal advice for you guys when you're in these situations. So thank you.
All right, and I will just end with this. I don't know if you are aware or know that Mayor Gabriel's mother passed away a couple of days ago. And I was going to try to get a card down here tonight so we could sign one, but I will get one and bring it by Mr. Foster's office. And if you guys can all pop in and sign it, I think that would be a good thing. I don't know if I was thinking we could all pitch in on some flowers or something for the service too, but I don't know what that looks like. So maybe if you can find out if that's a possibility, maybe we could do that too. But I'll bring a card by tomorrow. Sure. And we can do that. That being said, with all the business completed, the meeting is adjourned.